Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Workspace, the Old Dairy. My name is Stacey Leiden-Sapay. I'm the events manager at Workspace Group. We're thrilled to see so many of you joining us this morning for this next in our series of London's Brightest Businesses breakfast conversations. We're thrilled to have broadcaster and journalist Ben Fogle with us today to host this conversation with our expert panelists. Before I hand over to Ben, a little bit about Workspace for anyone who is unfamiliar with us. We are a provider of flexible office spaces. We have over 70 properties across London. Sustainability is a core part of our business strategy, and we are fully committed to bringing our business and our buildings to net zero carbon by 2030. Today we're hosting this event in Workspace, the Old Dairy. This is a more recent acquisition to our portfolio. It was added late last year. We're currently undergoing a full sustainability audit to bring this building in line with our sustainability strategy across our buildings. An excellent example of what this looks like once it's completed can actually be found right next door at Workspace The Frames. This building has smart energy management system, an air course heat pumps for heating, solar panels, cycling racks, a green roof for biodiversity enhancement, and is currently at green certification BREEAM Excellent. If you have time after this discussion, I would encourage you to step next door, grab a coffee in our cafe, and see what Workspace can achieve with our sustainability strategy. If you have time after the discussion also, please do speak to a member of the Workspace staff. Workspace team, could you give a little wave? Sort of dotted around the room. We'd be happy to chat to you about Workspace and our buildings and our overall strategies. Lastly, for me, there are no fire drills planned for today. So in the event of any alarm, please do make your way to the nearest emergency exit, which can be found behind the stage here, or through the doors that you came in, and follow a member of the Workspace staff to our meeting point. That's it for me. I'm going to hand over now to Ben Fogle, who's going to lead us through our conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to London's Brightest Businesses. I'm thrilled to be hosting this panel session this morning. Before we announce the whole panel, I thought we would begin by my eureka moment, the moment when I became passionate about sustainability and environmentalism, and then we'd go down the panel to hear about theirs. Mine was 23 years ago or so when I took part in a reality show. They've changed a lot since then. But back in 1999, I took part in a show where 36 of us were sent to live on an island for a whole year. A lot of people forget that. It was nearly 13 months. And it was one of the first TV experiments in sustainable living. 36 of us, we had to grow our own crops, we had to produce our own energy, and it was a fascinating experiment. And the reason it really was an experiment was because most of us came from urban backgrounds. I am a true Londoner, so I feel authority sitting here at London's Brightest Businesses breakfast today. And for me, it was the first moment I saw cause and effect, and it's where my kind of eureka moment happened. So let's go down the panel. Let's start with Lucy Dwyer. Lucy is Associate Director, ESG and Sustainability Strategy at Emphasis Sustainability Consultancy. So before we go into the kind of meat of all of this, what was your moment?
I think I didn't have so much a eureka moment. It's more kind of progressed as my career has progressed. I think kind of starting out, I was always really passionate about the role that business can play in the community. And I really felt the relationship between business and teaching. That's where I started out. And I moved into consulting, so really working with businesses to improve the operations and develop strategies. And it just emerged over time that sustainability really needs to be central to business for them to be successful long term. And yeah, so it's kind of been a natural evolution as my career's progressed. And I'm a big lover of nature and walking and spending time outdoors. So it all just sort of fits together quite nicely for me.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, moving on to our first Workspace customer, small business, Sam Choate, General Manager at Decent Packaging. Sam, when was your moment?
I guess our moment as a business, we started as a reusable cup company 10 years ago in New Zealand. We're 3 years old in the UK, and we kind of got to a point when we realised that there's 3 billion coffee cups every year in the UK are going to be consumed. I think 0.2 or something are recycled, and about 5% and improving, rightly, are going to be reused. So we thought, we can address that huge swathe of products which, are going to be a part of that 95%, which are lined with plastic. So we only make compostable food packaging. It's carbon zero. We're a B Corp business as well. And our thing is, while we're working on improving reuse and trying to be a better society that way, there's this problem that we think we can help address. And so that's why we do what we do and why we made that quite big pivot a few years ago.
And quickly, just picking up one thing. On a personal level, though, beyond the business,
yeah.
Was there a moment for you as an individual?
I've kind of been lucky in that I've worked for two businesses, Decent Packaging and also another business called Karma Drinks, and both had sustainability right at their core. And so I've been lucky to kind of only work in businesses that have that last little bit of this is why I go to work, which has been amazing, to be honest. I haven't experienced the other side, but I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing.
Thanks very much. Sonal Jain, Head of Sustainability at Workspace. So now I know that you have been working within this sphere for a very long time. Which came first? Did you become passionate about sustainability because of the work that you were doing, or were you attracted to sustainability because that was the core of who you are?
Honestly, I can't tell how it started. I actually, to be fair, my upbringing has been very sustainable. I've spent the first 20 years of my life growing up in a very small town in India. And I mean, my life has been very lean the first 20 years, very sustainable, and truly 1.5 degree aligned. And then I started my professional career the next 20 years in sustainability. So it's been kind of wired in my DNA. And yes, everything's been plodding along last 40 years. In terms of my Eureka moment, I'd say it has really been the last couple of years. And that's because I have seen sustainability being in the fringes to sustainability moving to center stage. And the spotlight, my goodness, has really given the boost to really drive that impact both professionally and personally.
So now, thank you very much. And last but not least, Tom Hares, CEO and co-founder at Buzz Bikes. Was there a moment, and again, with just as I was asking, so now, which came first, your personal passion or the sustainable business?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, morning, everyone. I had a moment. So I was living outside of the UK and moved back after 2 or 3 years of living in the US, and got back to London. And anyone that's done that and then moved back home, you kind of look at your city in a really fresh, new light. And I remember I was a specific kind of moment. I was looking for a new flat in Brixton, and was queuing for a bus and looking around, and kind of started thinking, why did I move back here? It felt really congested. It felt really polluted, and got obsessed with the idea of why more people didn't ride a bike. And when I started looking into that a little bit more, I started unpacking like the benefits of cycling, which are well told from a sustainability and a health perspective. I kind of found out a fact which surprised me, which is in the UK, only 2% of us cycle as the primary way that we get around. If you jump across to Europe and some of the stereotypical cycling cities, that number jumps up. Places like Amsterdam and Copenhagen to numbers like 40 and 60%. So I kind of got obsessed and quit my job and started a bike business.
Thank you very much. There's going to be a lot of small businesses in here that may have sustainability at their core. There may be some that want to kind of enter it at that entry level. I'm wondering, which drives which? Are you responding to customers, or are you providing for customers? How do you see it?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, where we operate mainly is that premium end of coffee, best coffee shops in London, and other cities. The demand of those businesses from their customers is that, you have to be offering more sustainable products. So if you kind of throw it back when we started, it was us versus a polystyrene cup. And that's almost sacrilegious now, right? You would never go and get a flat white and a polystyrene cup in a premium coffee shop. And so that's kind of that world that we operate in, where people want to know that they can get better products. So we only make products from plants, and I think that works in that environment. But I know that is kind of a small sector of the industry, and packaging is this enormous beast. But it's definitely been driven from the people running these cafes that we work with anyway.
Lucy, I'm wondering, you work, I know, with a lot of probably larger companies than those present today, or certainly represented on the stage. Is it easier to be sustainable if you were a large company than a small one? What are the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think we're seeing a lot more, so as you're right, we work typically more with kind of larger businesses and thesis, but we also do quite a lot of work with portfolio companies of private equity houses who more fit into that sort of SME bracket, maybe on the larger end. I think some of the challenges that we see with those sort of companies is kind of initially where to start. It's quite, you sort of hear the word sustainability or ESG as some of you will know it, and you're like, okay, what does this mean? There's so many acronyms, it's really scary. What is this net zero thing? And what is COP26? Like just all of these acronyms. So that's a big barrier, just kind of educating people, and I think that's a really good place to start, and not only at the most senior levels, but also throughout your employee base, because ultimately everyone has responsibility in your business. I think a big challenge as well is around the cost. So as a small business, you've got less power, and sometimes it's hard to know where to get started. So really just focus on a couple of things and just get going with it. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine, just try something else. But I would say try and get those priority issues identified early on. And that's how we work with all of our clients, whether they're big or small, because even the really large multinationals can't do everything at once. They can't be solving for the diversity and inclusion problem in the best possible way, while also focusing all of their resource, which is obviously finite, on the climate challenge.
Tom, some may think that by being a smaller business, you're more nimble and more agile. You can be more reactive to listening to your customers. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely two-sided, because I think that there is, I agree with Lucy, I think there's a financial cost that comes into being sustainable and having a sustainable strategy. But on the flip side, yeah, we can move way quicker. And Sam and I were talking earlier about something that they were doing, which I thought was amazing. That just takes me going back and speaking to the team and making it happen this afternoon, whereas in a larger company, you're going to have to get so much more approvals and strategy documents and things created. So I think there's pros and cons of being small, I suppose.
I think agility is like amazing in a small business, right? Because we make what we make right now. I can almost guarantee we'll be doing something different in 5 years' time, because we'll adapt with technology. We don't have to kind of put a flag in the sand and be like, this is what we do and this is what we do only. That could become something new, because what we want to do is, it's a thing that we say, is simplifying sustainability for our customers. So if there's a better option in the future that we come across that we believe in, we can pivot really quick and do that. And if that's better for our customers, that's the business we want to be. Whereas I think if you may be bigger and you do what you do, you might get outdated quite quickly, or you might need to make this radical change to do something different. Small business, you can pivot, which is good.
So now you must be aware of some of the other businesses that operate through Workspace, especially in the sustainability sector. I'd love to know some examples of what other people are doing.
Absolutely. It's completely agree with Sam about agility, and Tom, what you were saying about kind of responding to market need. One good thing about this job in Workspace is we have access to 3,000 brilliant businesses, and many of them are in green economy themselves. And I can truly say this is the breeding ground for innovation. Startup mindset is so future focused. We have businesses whose proposition rests on kind of what the future economy needs. And we know the future economy needs a sustainable economy. A great example is Her Fashion, which is again one of our customers. And they are really challenging this mindset about newness and about ownership in fashion, and really the model is about introducing circularity in fashion. And that's a great example of what the future economy needs, but by what the future economy needs. The other thing I have found, which plays to SME startup strength, is their connect with the customers, their ability to really understand the pain points, and they are so nimble that they are much well placed to simplify the processes. And just to give you an example, which we have ourselves experienced, one of our customers, Community Tech Aid, they recycle IT equipment for businesses. Now, in the olden days, our IT team would spend time, resources, wiping laptops, mobile phones, then paying someone to come, collect it, and recycle it. Community Tech Aid absolutely simplified the process at zero cost. They take it, they wipe it to international data destruction standards or whatever that is. So we are happy, our legal teams are happy. They don't charge it anything. They look at what can be recycled, but more importantly, they look at what can be upcycled, and they donate it to charities and local schools. So zero hassle transition for us to upcycle our IT equipment. And this is really, there's this beauty of adopting sustainable behaviors easy. I think our IT teams won't go back now to the old model. So there's some really good examples of what good practice looks like and how they're driving impact.
When we talk about sustainable behavior, I assume that Workspace has to also be quite nimble and adapt according to the wants and wishes of businesses, particularly when they're sustainable. So we heard about the building with the air source and the green roof and things. Are you trying to become more sustainable as a company yourselves, reactive to what the small businesses want?
Absolutely. I mean, I have colleagues in the business who have championed sustainability, waste management, energy management 20 years ago in our centers. However, what I hear is back in the day, it was done because it was the right thing to do. That's changed. I mean, it is the narrative at Workspaces, it is a commercial imperative for us. It is critical to our business success. And yes, we are listed business, we have drivers around investor pressure, we have to meet market expectation, match and exceed our peers, but our primary driver is coming from our customer base. We run this quarterly brand tracker survey. Our recent survey revealed, where we surveyed over 300 SME decision makers, and it revealed that over 85% of them really think sustainability is important to their business. And when we queried further to what extent it is informing decision making, 25% of them said they have actively decided against a contract or a partner based on sustainability credentials. So it is really informing decision making, who picks us to be in our buildings, and we ought to be really meeting, if not exceeding, their expectations. Now, what that means for us as owner of 70 buildings in London and then in Southeast is ensuring our buildings are meeting extreme high standards of environmental sustainability, be lean in energy, water, waste. But also our customers need the right sustainable amenities like bike racks, showers, sustainable food in cafes, right greenery, ample daylight. So it is really curating our buildings to meet the sustainability demands coming from customers.
About 10 years ago or so, my wife and I set up a small business trying to produce kind of nutritious snacking foods. I won't go into the detail, but for us, we wanted it to be as sustainable as possible. We simply couldn't find sustainable packaging because it would affect our bottom line. We simply didn't have the funds. Lucy, from some of the experiences you've had, I'm wondering how it can affect that bottom line positively and negatively.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this. I think kind of to what these guys have already mentioned, I think there's a real kind of consumer preference for sustainable products, and to an extent the price point becomes a bit irrelevant as long as it doesn't become too high, because they are looking for those credentials. When it comes to kind of business value, we are seeing more and more, so particularly, so as I said, I do a lot of work with private equity houses, so investors. Some of you might have sort of VC investment or maybe even PE investment yourselves, or maybe be looking for that in the future. And what we're seeing more and more is that these investors are seeing a strong ESG program as a value driver and as a way to create that value when they come to sell their share in the business. And yeah, so I think when you're looking for that investment, you want to be demonstrating to your potential investor that you're doing these things across not just environmental sustainability, but also across your social and your governance issues as well.
Tom, I'm wondering, with something like Buzz Bikes, when we're talking, and I'm not a business person, quite obviously, I'm wondering where you put your absolute focus. Like, would you compromise profit? Would you be willing to take less profit to maintain doggedly to your standards of sustainability?
I mean, theoretically, yes. I think that the reality at our stage of business, we're still relatively early, is sometimes, unfortunately, you have to make really pragmatic decisions that mean that perhaps you're not doing something as sustainably as not. Give you an example. So in our world, in the bike industry, it's one of these industries that you can sit there and feel quite happy with yourself that you're in a sustainable sort of category. The reality of the bike industry is that actually it's a really unsustainable industry as an industry in itself. You think about all of the different pieces that are coming together to make a bike in China and then being shipped here, and then all of the packaging. So there is an opportunity for us to ask the suppliers, which we've done, to reduce the amount of packaging that they send us, to send the bikes to us in a state that's not as put together, because it would reduce the amount of shipping required, number of boxes, etc. But the reality is there's a cost to that. So we've made some roads to doing that, and made some changes. But the sort of overall unit economics of the business start to get tougher if you push all the way into that. So for us, it's just about making steps that we can afford when we can afford to do it.
Least worst options. That's kind of what I often think. I think there's this fear that a lot of people have, and I have it myself. As soon as you say you're green or you're going to try and be sustainable, someone, maybe more than one person, will go, aha, but what about your shoes? That doesn't. And how did you get here today? We've kind of got this really difficult situation where people try to trip you up now.
Yeah.
And my advice is always to people, why, rather than this insistence that those 10% of us who are trying to make changes make a 100% change, wouldn't it be better if 100% of us made a 10% change?
Yeah. Totally.
I'm wondering with you that there could be a case where people say, but you're not addressing the problem, you're still producing single-use coffee cups.
Yeah.
Do you worry about that? Do you get accusations of hypocrisy?
Yeah, I'm probably the easiest target in the room, right? But our take is pretty honest. Like I said before, there's that stats around how much packaging is produced. Plastic packaging is going to double by 2030. So as much as that reuse curve is on the rise, rightly so, so is the use of plastic packaging. And our thing is, for that huge amount, can we help transition some customers? And we're a small business, but can we help transition some of those customers away from using oil and away from using fossil fuels? It's about 80% better using a plant-based cup from a carbon point of view than it is, using fossil fuels. So we should all be doing that anyway, and then we should be working with our customers to try and solve the end-of-life debate, which is massive and goes around and around in circles. But there's a step at the start that I think validates what we're trying to do, and I think that's okay. We're not the only solution, and we don't say that we're the only solution, but I think we can contribute to being part of it.
I try to be green, but I'm aware, my shortcoming comes in air travel. I fly a lot for my work, so my carbon footprint is way higher than most people's, but I try to make changes elsewhere. They might not be so obvious until I say to you, I drive an electric car, I have a heat exchange, air source at home. How does a company, Lucy, avoid an accusation of what we now know as greenwashing, whereby you say you're doing something, but it's purely symbolic? Or is it? And this is the question, should we be championing, we could go on for hours about this, but should we be championing even businesses who have no green credentials whatsoever? On the contrary, they might be the bogeymen of climate change out there. How do all those balls stay in the air?
Yeah, I think there's a real fear around greenwashing, and everyone sort of hears that term.
And can you, from your perspective, can you interpret what greenwashing is to everyone in this room? Because there may be some people that don't fully understand what.
Yeah, essentially, when you say greenwashing, you're saying that someone or a company is claiming to be doing things that are good for the environment, but actually when you look underneath it, they're not actually taking any of the action to reach those targets that they're trying to achieve. As an example, an organisation might have set a really ambitious net zero target, but they've got absolutely no action plans in place to realise that goal. So that essentially is greenwashing until that point when they've actually got action in place. So I guess, my view on greenwashing is, I'm not saying it's good, it's not good, but I think that where there's intention, that has to be a good thing. And where there's intention, that then leads to action. And almost the fear of being accused of greenwashing, I think, can sometimes stop an organisation or even an individual, we're talking about founders or whatever, from taking action in the first place, or even starting to maybe put a declaration on the website around, we're trying to be more sustainable. Because that normally is a really good first step, kind of make a public announcement around what you want to do, and then, kind of internally to underpin that and to kind of prevent that accusation of greenwashing, you need to be thinking about, okay, what's the governance structure that we have in place to ensure we do have this integrity behind that declaration. So what are our targets? How are we tracking against those targets? What are we measuring? And to what extent can we publicly share this information as well? I think transparency is probably the most effective way to prevent that accusation of greenwashing, because ultimately you want to build trust with all of your stakeholders, so your consumers, your customers, also future employees. They want to know that what you're doing is good and robust.
What I love chatting to you guys, and I think a lot of you are doing it in here, is that you are enacting a lot of this change yourselves, but I know there's a lot of businesses that are waiting for policy to come from the top down. There's a lot of people that think that our government should be making very strong policy that is pushing us and sweeping us towards sustainability. So now I know that you were involved in COP last year, earlier this year in Glasgow. I'm wondering what you thought came out of that, that some may say slightly chaotic conference.
Yeah, well, the thing is solely relying on government across the globe to find consensual solution to this massive problem is the foolish thing to do. I mean, and also, if you are in this game because you want to benefit from the sustainable tailwinds, you got to move early. There is an early mover advantage which exists now, will not exist in 10 years' time when governments across the world will regulate it. Then everyone has to do it. So, it's really your decision whether you do it now, take that leap, show your future focus and progressive, take their benefit or wait for governments to do the bit. And to be fair, I mean, it's really interesting what this week it came out in the papers that the UK government was taken to court because their net zero strategy wasn't deemed lawful. It's also, you know, you can't rely on government to really lead the way. It's joint responsibility. It's public sector, it's private sector, it's us. I mean, citizens, we can vote with our money, we can vote with votes, we can make lifestyle changes, we can create demand. It's everyone's job, to be honest.
Cultural, I think I look at it as cultural changes, that we just have to change how we do things. So for me, simple, I have to put in front of the front door now, I put a bag and a coffee cup and a water bottle, so I just don't forget it, because I'm so used to just leaving the house. So if we're talking about not becoming an also-ran and being there ahead of it, Sam, I'm really interested in the culture of work ethics. You've introduced a 4-day work week, is that right? So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because some people may be horrified by that, some people may find that a really exciting proposition.
Yeah, no, we're hiring.
It's very Kiwi, I think we can agree.
No, look, I mean, we came out of COVID trying to figure out how to be a group again, how to build rapport, how to work remotely and sort of not have that Friday at the pub thing and do all that. We started writing a whole load of policy around mental health, physical health, sick days, you know, trying to just do the right thing for our people. The intention was right, but we kind of just started writing lists and it became a bit ridiculous, you know. So what we did is said, look, why don't we just do a 4-day week? The 5th day a week is for you to do whatever it is for you that's well-being, you know, so whether that's going to the gym, playing with your kids or, you know, anything really, like just go and do it. But what we do need, you know, for the 4 days that you come in is high performance, you know, and then we've got some systems around how we drive that. And it's been incredible. We're kind of, 14 months in now, 15 months, some of the team here. And it's permanent and we love it. And we've seen productivity go through the roof and people are committed and we have this kind of earn your Friday off mantra in the office, you know, and everyone does kind of work to that because it's a great thing to try and have. I'd struggle to go back now, to be honest. It's now like a family day. So yeah, it's been amazing. You do have to put a lot of structure around, you know, how do you make sure people are supported working remotely and what do those 4 days mean and, you know, KPIs and all that sort of stuff to make sure the tension's right in the group. But hard workers work hard. People who don't work hard won't work hard, and 4 or 5 days won't make a difference. And so, yeah, it's been incredible, and it kind of helps us be this business that we project outwards. You know, this sort of, I think, kindness and doing things the right way projects outwards to our customers, and hopefully when they, you know, look into our business, they see that we're a good bunch doing things the right way. So yeah.
Having spent a lot of time with people who live much simpler, slower lives, as I do, mental well-being does provide great clarity. I come back from some of these faraway places and I genuinely feel I see a simple solution, but then you suddenly get inundated with information and other things and it becomes clouded again. Tom, how important is a good workspace to kind of providing hopeful optimism and goals and happy staff?
Yeah, massively important, and we're doing a big overhaul at the moment, and I was fascinated talking to Sam earlier about the 4-day work week because it sort of horrifies me as a business owner to start with, and then you start to hear some of the sort of productivity benefits, and it came a really timely conversation because we're going through this process right now. And one of the most important things for us is feedback from the people that exist in the company. We're not a top-down type of company. We're continuously getting feedback from people. We want to hear exactly how people are feeling in the company, and how we reciprocate that back to them as we are really, really transparent with what's happening in the company, why we can do certain things, why we can't do certain things. And so I think showing that you're listening and then responding and going back to that agility point earlier, and then doing, and then have the ability to do really quickly. And give you a quick recent example, and it ties into the other point too about, you know, can sustainability, where are you going to fall when it comes to sustainability, or what's better for the business. The heat that we sort of all got really carried away about over the last few days, which, you know, it was hot. We have an office team and we have a warehouse team, And all the office team, well, we can't come in, and we understood that, and we said, look, don't come in. We don't want you to travel on the tubes. But the warehouse team physically have to be in this warehouse. They have to put bikes together, and then the first idea was we'll stop that for the day. But we simply can't afford not to be getting bikes out and getting people out and keeping the business moving. What we offered people instead was to come in, super early, if they wanted to, and choose their own hours for the day. And I think it's just making those little choices that help people, live a nicer work life.
Just picking up one thing, because I'm really curious, and I'm sure others are. You were talking earlier about the sustainability of bikes. I think of it as one of the greenest industries out there. Do a lot of bikes end up in landfill? I mean, I think of a bike lasting forever. Yeah. Even if I don't have it, I can't help but think it ends up somewhere where someone will cycle it until the whole thing falls apart. Yeah. Well,
the crazy thing, and I met a guy from British Cycling. He told me this, and haven't been able to find the exact stat, but the proportion of bikes that end up in landfill, I think it was something like 60 or 70%. And the reality is, what most people do, and everyone will know someone like this, is say, I'm going to get into cycling. It's a good thing to do, and then it rains or they get demotivated, and the volume of bikes that are sat in sheds that then end up in landfill is massive. So what we do, I guess, is it's much more of a kind of circular economy approach to it, which is our bikes, which are steel frame, which means that they will go on and on and on and on, whereas an aluminium one won't. It will get dented and broken. Is that someone on average will use a buzz bike for 7 or 8 months. That will come back in, it gets refurbed, and then it will go on to someone else. And the average number of times that people that will use a buzz bike in its initial lifetime will be 5, and then after that point it will either be refurbed, which again is good for business for us, so we can completely refurb it and then start that cycle again, or if it's in a really bad state, the parts will be taken apart, and then we donate to a company called Bikes for Africa, who will put together bikes and then send them out to Africa. So I think that people think naturally I'm cycling, and it's a positive thing, but you need to make sure that bike is used for its whole lifetime.
Sam, you were saying that you predict your business might not be doing anything it's doing now in, forgive me if I got it wrong, like 5 years, you were saying. So what is the future like? I'm not saying asking you to be a psychic. Yeah. But what is the future? How do you think things are going to change? How should we be consuming our coffee? How will we be consuming our coffee on, when we stop in a fast food chain?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? There's a pyramid. Reuse is absolute priority, so everyone should be doing that wherever they can. And then you've kind of got recycle, which needs some work around.
To interrupt you, you're not doing yourself out of business there if it's reuse. You're currently providing a business producing a lot of single-use coffee cups, so you're actually driving your business into the ground.
Well, look, I think it's just being realistic. Like, that is the best thing to use, as long as you do reuse a lot, and not just grab loads of reuse, I guess, you know what I mean? And then you've got recycle or compost, then you've got incineration, and you've got landfill, right? And anything going to landfill, whether it's a banana, a chair, me, or a cup, is not good, because it's compacted, there's no light, and there's no oxygen. You can pull out papers from the 60s and read them. That's bad. So, yeah, where I think food packaging is going, I don't think usage is going to go down. The data is certainly not saying that, but I think technology is moving so quickly that there is going to be some exciting, advances pretty soon. They're now making food packaging out of seaweed and mushrooms and growing it and developing it, and once that stuff hits scale, you can start to replace what was a polystyrene cup with what is now a plastic-lined cup to what we've got, which is a plant-based cup, to what the next version of that could be, is really exciting. And it's like 5 years, stuff's happening that quickly. Whereas I think stopping plastic from doubling by 2030, the technology is going to happen faster than I think that changes. So that's what we're kind of excited about, but we're flexible. We'll do what we think is right for our customers.
So now, when I hear what lots of the businesses at Workspace are doing, it strikes me that one is helping the other become more sustainable. So Sam producing coffee cups for the small business means that they can say they are more sustainable. Tom, by providing your form of bicycles for staff getting to work, and then you're forced to enact change. So it's almost like a circular economy within the businesses. Do you see that happening? Do you see one helping another?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a total push-pull through value chain, whether it's client-driven or customer-driven. Ultimately, we all are transitioning to a way of living that's more sustainable. And, if you ask me, what does future hold? And I was just reflecting on this very interesting conversation I had this week. I was at the Belgian ambassador's residence for dinner on Tuesday, and he asked me, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a sustainability professional. And he said, aren't we all? And while he wasn't factually right, I think that's what future holds. Everyone is probably transitioning. This push-pull means even if you hadn't planned it, you'll probably land up adopting those behaviors. And actually, this is my moment to plug in the great work our events and marketing team have done here. I am head of sustainability at Workspace. I have got nothing, I haven't influenced the sustainability credentials of this event. They have done it on their own accord. They are driving it. Everything here, from sets to foliage to food, has brilliant sustainability credentials, will have a second life after this event. And it is really, the future is each one of us becomes a sustainability professional in their own right.
Lucy, I'm wondering, there may be companies here that want to enact change, but that change might be quite subtle, because it might just be about their office environment. It might be invisible changes. So if you're making those invisible changes, they're having a positive effect on the environment, but how does a small business like those who are present today, how do they shout about it? And do they shout about it? Because if you shout about it, are you then accused of using it to greenwash other shortcomings?
I mean, to my earlier point, I think it is really good to talk about what you're doing, because...
But how do you do that?
So I think it's important to make your employees aware of what you're doing, first and foremost. So the fact that this event has used these plants that will be reused, and so now I was talking about the technology all being reusable as well. Second hand. I think the fact that so all of these elements that made up this event is a really cool thing for Workspace to go away and promote to their employees, through like their internal comms mechanisms. And similarly, if you as a business, you might have done like a health and well-being event for your team. It's like, let's shout about that and what the benefits have been, get some testimonials going around through your internal comms, but then also external comms as well. So whether that's on your website, whether that's on LinkedIn, it just builds up your brand as being synonymous with sustainability, and wanting to have that positive impact.
Tom, I'm thinking the nature of your business is kind of advertising when people see the bikes kind of going around town, but you're in a busy market, big city, there's all sorts of forms of transport available to people. What are your thoughts kind of moving forward? If we leave this build, if we suddenly we're in some time warp and we step out of here in 10 years' time, I'm wondering what the landscape of the London commute is going to look like.
Well, I think what's really interesting coming out of COVID is that there was this, we were talking about earlier, there's this belief that there's this exodus, or there was exodus of big cities. Everyone's moving to the countryside. And that was actually just a really short-term thing. The reality at a macro level is cities are about to get, so imagine yourself on the tube coming in this morning, and we're back to that horrible packed mentality. Without sort of scaremongering, cities, I think by 2050, you might have better stats to hand, but by 2050, something like going to triple in terms of the occupancy of a city. So if you walk down the street and you think, oh, this feels a little bit tight and this is a bit busy, or you're on a tube or on your bus, it's about to get a lot worse. And the policymakers know that, which is why they've allowed a lot of the sort of shared mobility providers onto the streets. It's fairly well organised here. If you go to Europe, there's scooters and bikes all over the place, and they've done that because they know that it's just not going to work, like the way that we move around cities. And they also know, speaking to a guy that runs a company called Wiggle, so huge, used to run a company called Wiggle, huge bike retailer. And he was speaking to someone in government who said, look, all politicians know that the reality is that most big cities will need to be car-free. They won't allow cars in cities. There'll be some movement allowed, but they're not. It's not going to work to have cars in cities. So I think you can expect to see way more people and lots of new kind of future-looking ways to move around cities. And I don't think the answer is Uber, because that's just adding to the congestion.
I'm wondering if each of you were to give one piece of advice to a small business here that wanted to up their sustainability game, whether that is kind of above the line or below the line, what might that be? Sam, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're a B Corp, we're pending anyway, and I mean.
And can you expand on that? Because I'm sure everyone understands, but just in case there are people who don't fully know what B Corp means, can you?
Yeah, so there'll be an official line which I won't remember, but it's kind of an audit of your sort of governance, your people policies, your supply chain policies, kind of everything to do with your business. It's kind of like the new version of like a fair trade, but it's an inward look. And whether you go through with the certification or not, I'd recommend everyone just like go through the process, especially as small businesses and owners and founders who are probably, maybe blinkered sometimes. You have to ask yourself some pretty tough questions, and it's a really good process to go through. And I've done it twice now, and the first time was with the whole team. And so getting everyone's perspective on how that little bit of software works or how the warehouse works and stuff like that is really interesting, and it's worth doing, because as much as B Corp might be getting a little bit of heat now for people wanting to commercialize it, in essence it's still a great thing to do, because it's a look at how you do things. And as long as you're doing it for that reason and not to sell more because the sticker's on your bottle or whatever, I think that's a good step, and you can improve that score every year. And as long as you're committed to that, it's the intention thing you were saying, as long as you go, right, this year we scored 85, next year we want to try and get to 88. These are the things where we scored low on. Here are some things that we want to try and do to be better. It's great. And so I'd recommend anyone just going through it. You don't have to go through the whole process, but it's cool to ask yourself those questions. So yeah, that'd be my tip.
And have you found that helps as a company, because all the employees get to see, they get to see under the carpet. They get to see what's being swept under there.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of open source. It's holding the mirror to yourself, which is
scary.
Yeah. I mean, you ask some pretty tough questions. You have some debates and have a few arguments and stuff like that. But you're doing it for the right reason. And in a small team, your employees are probably more invested in that stuff than maybe in a big company. So, yeah, I mean, small groups, everyone has a loud voice, so you can use it for good, I think. And
when you've been through that B Corp process, I'm wondering whether you actually take some of those things home to your home life. You've got kids. I'm wondering how much that sustainability actually then gets taken into your own personal life.
You try. I think that's all you can do, right? Is try your best. I mean, I've got 2 little girls that still use disposable nappies, right? And it's like we didn't go down the other route, but you try your best, and I think as long as you can say that you're trying to change what you can change, that's okay. But you don't have to be this perfect person that is, foolproof. I got a train here, and I am going on a holiday, and there's a lot of plastic in my house because I've got these little kids running around and stuff, and that's okay sometimes. You don't have to be so hard on yourself, but you should be aware of what you choose to buy.
Lucy, you're nodding there. Do you agree with some of those sentiments?
Yeah.
And what's your advice?
So yeah, a couple of points to kind of add to that. So on the B Corp point, so we're also a B Corp. We went through that process and thesis. So really proud to say that we have the B Corp certification. But also a slight plug here, but it's something that we can also help businesses with if they're considering going through that process themselves, because it can be a bit overwhelming. There's also a stage where you sort of do the initial assessment, and then you have to look at what you need to do to improve that score to get above the threshold, so we can help with kind of the action planning piece as well. On the, I guess, yeah, what you were just saying there around you do what you can. I mean, that is just really key. And, you know, I touched on it before, like around having the intention is better than not doing anything at all. I think that's definitely true in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives as well, and in our businesses. Just get going and see what you can do. I think the piece of advice I would give fundamentally would be engage with your stakeholders. So for most of you, probably your first stakeholder will be your employees, your team, what's important to them, because you need them to be bought into whatever initiative you start for it to work. And that's how innovation thrives as well. You're going to get creative and things will snowball from there. And they'll also be the first to tell you this isn't working. And I guess you guys can probably talk to that more than me. So yeah, really start to understand what's important to them, and I think that will help you get momentum and go from there. And just keep learning, just keep getting educated around what is happening in this space, what are your peers doing as well.
Tom, what would be your advice?
Just one quick point as well, just interested in Lucy's perspective on something that Sam said. Is it okay, or I would argue it's okay, to be doing B Corp, for example, to put it on your bottle, to sell more bottles, if that's doing good? Because I think for me, where the crossover like with sustainability and profitability sort of like happens, then that's a great thing, because from a business it means you're going to grow, but it's going to do good at the same time. And if your intention of doing B Corp is to sell more bottles, but it drives better impact in sustainability in your company, is that okay, I suppose?
That's the dream, isn't it?
That's the dream, yeah.
Where everything is aligned, you're doing something impactful, but also you're making more money because you're driving more demand to your product.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a B Corp, we're proud of it, as I say, and we fly that flag proudly, but we're also not complacent with it, and we're constantly thinking, okay, what else can we do, and how can we help our clients to do more?
Yeah.
And we're inherently tied to what our clients do, and part of that is because we actually have a 3 gigaton reduction target of carbon emissions by 2030, which is huge. We can only do that if our clients are actively making those reduction choices themselves.
Okay.
Tom, just quickly before you give your advice, it strikes me that there's 2 types of sustainable business we're talking about here. There are sustainable businesses like yourself that are marketing, that your USP is your sustainability, and that is what your marketplace is all about. I think what's exciting for me, Lucy, is that there will be other businesses here for whom that isn't their USP, but they can still be more sustainable. So B Corp can be put on your bike or your bottle and proudly sold to encourage people that want to buy that sustainable product. But you can also just do your human bit, which Sonal, you and I were talking about before. It should just be like with your dinner with the Belgian ambassador. We should all be being sustainable. It's kind of odd that we're having a debate about how a business can be sustainable, because that's probably the root that we just need to change our culture.
It's not an end goal, it's like it's an ongoing journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tom, your advice?
Very quickly, I mean, I think it's a cheesy saying, but a good one, which is analysis paralysis. And when we first started the business a couple of years in, we put together sustainability committees, and we're creating strategy documents and all the things that we were going to do to make sure we were a sustainable company. And then we look at the actual outcome of all of that, and it was pretty minimal, versus what are the quick things that we can do now? Like, what are those things that draw a list, put 5 things on a piece of paper and start actioning them now? And I think we will get to a stage as a company where having a full-blooded sustainability strategy committee, maybe someone that actually runs it and drives it. But for now, at this life stage, it's just about doing something quick and now.
So now, do you have any advice
I mean, I completely agree. I think there's a common theme about getting started with it. So I guess the only thing I could offer is, you know what, let us help you. If you think we can do most of you are in our centers, if you think we can do anything for you to make your operations more sustainable, we would welcome that feedback and we can help you. We have probably a bit more resources than some of you in the room.
One of the B Corp was a bit of a mystery to me, but what I found quite exciting in my medium of work is that it exists for everyday people, not just businesses, in a new experiment. It's actually started in Wales called One Planet. And forgive me if all of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I had never heard of it, and I work in this field quite a lot. And One Planet offers citizens, people, a way of accounting their lifestyle and then being permitted to live a very simple, self-sufficient lifestyle in a wood or an area of green land traditionally out of bounds to people. And it's a fascinating initiative where you have to catalogue your mileage per day, your flights per year, how much you spend on food, how much you produce yourselves. And according to that data, you can live in some pretty exciting parts of the world. So for me, it feels like we just need to collaborate a little bit more as human beings, get away from this notion of saving the planet. This is what I keep saying, the planet's not going anywhere. It's us we need to save. And as soon as we change this whole mindset, I think we can have a kind of a unifying goal and not turn this into a tribal battle. On that note, I know everyone probably has to get back to work. Hopefully you don't have too far to travel. Thank you very much for coming today. I hope that you have taken some food for thought. Thank you to all of our panelists for a fascinating conversation there. And I look forward to the third breakfast here at Workspace. And thank you to Workspace for hosting this fantastic morning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.